Hello and happy October. So now that we're officially in October and the weather is actually cooling off a bit, I thought it would be fun to do a little side video review on a horror action game I played recently, which is Dying Light the Beast. So before I get into my whole spoiler discussion, I just wanted to basically say that I highly recommend this game. I feel like it was advertised way less than Dying Light 2, to the point that I didn't really know that it was a full game and that it was coming out until its release date. I feel like I had heard of the Beast previously and maybe had seen a bit of its promotional art, but I kind of thought it was gonna be like a weird side multiplayer game or a spin-off or just DLC or something like that. So I was totally surprised that this was like a full release. So there's my little public service announcement that if you enjoyed the previous Dying Light games, and especially if you liked Dying Light 1, because Dying Light 2 is pretty contentious, I highly recommend you check out this game and play it before consuming this review, because I will be spoiling it. Also want to give a warning that I will be mentioning spoilers for Dying Light 1 and Dying Light 2, as well as the DLC for Dying Light 1, which is called The Following. So if you don't want any of those to be spoiled, there's your warning. But that being said, I think we can jump right into it. All right, so I gotta admit, this is one of those games that it feels like I don't even know where to start. I guess I could say I really, really loved this one. So I feel like with Dying Light the Beast, you can't fully talk about it without addressing sort of the elephant in the room, which is Dying Light 2. So Dying Light 2 came out and everyone was really excited for it because Dying Light 1 became like a huge cult classic, and it had gotten such continuous support that it sort of just kept growing year by year and getting a better and better reputation, and people who normally are like, oh, I don't like zombie games, began to find that, you know, it was sort of like a hidden gem because it had this complex parkour system, really fun multiplayer, and actually a really good story. And then Dying Light 2 came out, and it sort of felt like they basically undid everything that made Dying Light 1 good. I remember I played it on release, and I mean, there were like no hordes of zombies. There were like 5 in the street at any given time. The parkour felt more clunky. They had completely removed any sort of like guns or weapons that were iconic in the first game. We also had a new protagonist, which was Aiden, and he just kind of sucked as a protagonist because in Dying Light 1, Crane was this really cool iconic character who was like military, going on this secret operation for like a shadowy government organization, and got caught up in a whole conspiracy, but he was actually like a well-equipped and trained fighter and cared about people, so he was also like a morally cool hero, and was just really interesting and compelling as he got further and further invested in Haran, which is a setting he was not previously familiar with. Whereas Aiden has this like really kind of lame plot where he's looking for his sister, who doesn't really end up being his sister, and he's just has these kind of cringy flashbacks, and I don't know, I felt like there was sort of a weird vibe going on with it too, when you consider the fact that he was basically so obsessed with his sister that at times it kind of got a little uncomfortable because he's in this, you know, apocalyptic world, and he kind of bumps into some like romantic interesty characters, but he keeps sort of disregarding them because his pursuit of his sister is his ultimate most important thing, and I don't know. And also there's sort of like, which has become a meme in the community, which is that he kind of had in his flashbacks, I believe her name's Mia, is his sister, and she had this thing where she'd go 80 babady, and it did not make a very compelling protagonist. And you add on top of that all the gameplay issues, and also some really like unlikable supporting characters. So a big thing, which I will talk about as it relates to the Beast shortly, is that like supporting characters in these games have ranged from compelling to like more often than not just really annoying. So like Dying Light sometimes feels like a Far Cry game, but like with zombies. So they often feel like they sort of lean on having these very like annoying characters as a sense of humor. So like in the first one, there would be these like twins who would insult you the entire time you were working with them, or people who were like sort of crazy, but it was always just kind of in an annoying way, because then they would often give you a quest that felt like an annoying chore, and they would be insulting. And so like, you know, you're not like, oh, I like this character. At best you would be getting a laugh, but you wouldn't be concerned about that character if they got in trouble. But within the main cast of Dying Light 1, there were some, you know, compelling characters like Jade and I'm forgetting his name, but like the leader of the Survivor faction, who's like the parkour coach. Like there were some really compelling characters who you did genuinely care about, but it was always annoying that those characters would then like refer you to go help someone who ended up being like the most annoying character you ever met. Dying Light 2 suffered from that a lot too. Basically the entire first act of the game, which sort of serves as like a tutorial prologue where you're in this smaller area, I don't think I liked a single character I met. There's one character who kind of feels like he's supposed to be the villain, or I guess better said would be the antagonist of that area, because he's like blockaded it off as he investigates a murder. He ended up being one of the most like reasonable, likable characters, which is super weird because he sets the tone that the sort of like peacekeeper blue uniformed faction tends to actually be the more likable characters, because a lot of the survivors end up being just really annoying, or they actually kind of end up being antagonistic through their basically like character choices, etc. So just sort of an annoying setup. So you have Aiden, he's kind of lame. You have, you know, lame mechanics. So the thing with the mechanics is they were basically trying to go with, oh, well, the apocalypse happened, so humanity basically goes back to the Dark Age. But I felt like they did not commit enough, in that they basically just took away any interesting weapons and then left you with, you know, a stick. But the thing is it would have been so cool if they had it where, kind of like what you see in like the Fallout games, where people started to, you know, use welding equipment to take scraps of steel, etc., and make armor. And since they wanted to do this sort of Dark Age aesthetic, if they had made like a more of a modern medieval where we saw people actually have like full-on swords and like knight armor, but it's, you know, like rusty steel apocalypse aesthetic, that would have been really cool. But instead they kind of just have it where it's like, well, some people have bow and arrows, and it's sort of Dark Age, but they didn't fully commit, so it just ended up being like, these weapons suck. And what's weird though is, so Dying Light 2 then started to get fixed little by little. They started to add in content. They started to make the knights feel more scary and the volatiles more scary. And it ended up becoming a pretty decent game that I would recommend now in its current state you check out. But all of that's a preface to say that the Beast feels like a total, you know, course correction. This is what 2 should have been, to the point that it's sort of mystifying that 2 even happened, because, and again, this is where we're going to get into big spoilers for the new game as well. Dying Light the Beast effectively is a sequel to Dying Light 1, and especially Dying Light 1's DLC, The Following. And so, since it's a sequel of that, it's all the more mystifying that we have this Dying Light 2 story at all, because feels like the natural next place that the story was supposed to go, in which we follow more of Crane and basically see what has happened to him as the Haran virus has spread to the rest of the world, etc. So, as I discuss the Beast, I want to say, I wanted to say all that to say that it feels like a good course correction and what the series should have been. So now I want to focus on some of the pros, some of the cons of the actual story, and basically what this game might mean for the rest of the franchise, etc. So we'll jump into that now. So one of the first things I really wanted to cover is a comparison that I feel like is impossible not to make, which is this game, Dying Light the Beast, to Resident Evil, which is sort of surprising at first, but then as you play it, it totally makes sense. So basically, the Dying Light 1 really felt like it was a zombie game with a bit of Far Cry in its DNA, and the big twist was sort of an Assassin's Creed-esque parkour system. So you had Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, and then zombies, and that was sort of the equation that got you Dying Light 1. Dying Light 2 pretty much was basically the same thing, just kind of more stripped down, and like I said, a bit of some medieval aesthetics added in, which is basically covered by the Assassin's Creed part. And I will say, this one had a Dying Light 2 had a bit of fallout, sort of with it kind of felt like that one faction was like the Brotherhood of Steel. At least to me it felt sort of similar, because they were like a police-esque military faction. But then you get this new one, the Beast, which it felt so much like a Resident Evil game. You get these third-person, POV cutscenes. You get, evil scientists, and it's sort of an emphasis on the science aspect of this sort of apocalypse, which feels a lot like the plot of Resident Evil with the T virus and all of that. You get your sort of larger than life characters, and especially protagonists, where Crane kind of feels almost like the main guy, Chris, from Resident Evil, and the whole Stars group. So you get a larger than life characters, you get and in general, the plot just has that sort of also larger than life plot. So while the other ones felt much more like they were just a guy who had a small story, Aiden just wants to find his sister, Crane just wants to sort of get revenge on this former GRE operative and also sort of get out alive. While this one is, a huge revenge plot, but by the end of it, as you see, it becomes a much bigger plot than just, a simple revenge thing, and it ends on this huge bombastic moment, which feels very Resident Evil coded. Now, the thing is I think all of that's really good. I think it's really cool. I really like the Resident Evil game, so I liked seeing its influence here. And having also sort of a large cast was really cool, and I liked seeing at the end this sort of ensemble cast come together and how they all sort of interacted with one another. I will say, not to be negative and a bit of a Debbie Downer, but it does leave me feeling a little worried about the future of the franchise, only because, so basically in DL1 and DL2, there were some mutants, but for the most part, it was still a pretty basic zombie game. This one, the Beast, has so many mutants, and the final boss is a human who injects himself with some sort of chemical solution that makes him into a super zombie, and power-ups, and also Crane is even more of a mutant now. And as a result, I get a little nervous about where the series is going to go from here. Because as we all saw with Resident Evil, the crazier you make it, the sequel has to be even crazier, and the next installment has to be even crazier and larger than life, that I feel like in the next game we're really going to get away from it feeling like an actual zombie apocalypse, because the previous games really felt like you were just an individual in a city that was overtaken with zombies, and so you were, going through the streets, that sort of open world, detailed, and it just felt like you were sort of surviving day by day. You can't eliminate all the zombies, it's not linear, etc. And it felt really immersive in that way. But as this series goes now, with characters who are able to transform into larger than life monsters and everything, I just feel like it's going to get less and less grounded, which, since Dying Light 2 kind of sucked, maybe that's the direction the series has to go. But Resident Evil sometimes feels like a cautionary tale of, going larger and larger and larger and larger in that way. And I also just feel like I don't want to lose some of the charm that makes Dying Light. If it starts to become where, we're a super team that's fighting only super zombies with crazy weapons and gadgets and scientific discoveries, it's just going to be maybe not for me. But that's sort of my only bit of sort of doom and gloom for the future, is that, like, where can they go in this franchise after that end? Because also now you have this whole ensemble that's all together. And in the first one, you're a single person who parachutes into this unknown setting and you have to make connections. In the second one, you're similarly a pilgrim who's from outside the city who enters it to try to get information and then has to make connections. But now I feel like we've got like this whole sort of squad with Lydia and Olivia and Crane and Aiden and everybody. So it feels all the more like, where are things going to go? Like, is this group going to travel together? Are they going to be going off on separate missions against the GRE and kind of have like, almost like a military flair to themselves? I don't know. I'm just a little nervous, but I feel like I'm going on about that a little too long. So now I'll jump into my next point. All right. So I think the best way to handle this next part is to sort of do like a sort of a pros and cons list, but it's really more like things I liked versus things I didn't. So I loved the environment. So basically, in all the other games, we're in a destroyed, abandoned city, and in this one, we get to be out in this sort of like Alps natural landscape. We're in this pine tree forest, it's stormy, etc. Just really, really cool. We get the mountains, and really cool. I thought it was really refreshing, and I was so excited when the game started and I saw that it was going to be in this environment. I also really thought the lore was cool. This sort of like barren figure, and the asylum was like perfect mood, perfect vibes for the story. And also, ironically, I feel like they sort of handled the whole medieval vibe so much better in this game, because the Baron character, he's called the Baron, he has a castle, you got the old gothic medieval towns that the survivors are in. It handled the medieval so much better. It handled, weapons and equipment a lot better. The only thing is, which I guess I should now put on the red part, is I kind of felt like the grappling hook was like way less smooth than in previous games. And in the first game, the grappling hook was one of my favorite aspects, because there's like nothing more heart-pounding than being chased by, a scary monster, volatile, etc., and then escaping last second via a grappling hook. And it was so smooth and responsive and fast, and I felt like I never really got a good handle of the grappling hook in this game. And since also you're in the woods most of the time, while you can use the grappling hook on the trees, it often just feels like it's more efficient to just keep running forward. So I was a little disappointed by that. But beyond that, in terms of, especially in comparison to Dying Light 2, much better use of, your weapons, your equipment, etc. It was also like really scary at times. Nights felt terrifying. The beast felt terrifying. There were some really actually good jump scares in this game where the other games didn't really have them, or they just didn't land if they were there. While this one, I had a couple moments where it actually made me like jump out of my chair because it was so unexpected. And it also wasn't overdone, so you never felt like you were, oh, here comes another jump scare. You were always on the edge of your seat, which was really fun. I loved the new characters. I really liked the entire cast. Even the Baron I felt was super compelling, so the villains were compelling. Your sort of sidekicks and side companions were really compelling. The factions were compelling. I really liked everybody in this. Crane was also great. It was great having him back. And his new powers I really liked. At first I was a little hesitant just because, I don't know, I thought if it was going to use it, it would actually like eliminate some of the pacing in the game if you became too overpowered. And I kind of like always feeling like I'm just a vulnerable human. But it was handled really well because it's so limited when you can use it, that when you do get to use it, it feels just like fun and satisfying, and then it quickly goes back to you fighting for your life. So I thought the balancing there was really well done. And like I said, I really enjoyed, the story. I liked the Resident Evil vibes and comparisons and things like that. And sorry, looking through a list. Let's see what else. Despite what I said, also, I wanted to clarify with my previous point about the whole Resident Evil thing. Despite me being a bit nervous about where the series is going to go, just because Resident Evil kind of started getting like so insane, it was hard to follow and got kind of campy. I have never felt more excited about this series than pretty much before Dying Light 2 came out, but I feel even more excited, honestly. The ending of this one was so strong that, like, I'm counting down the days until we get Dying Light 3 or whatever it ends up being called, just because I felt like this was such a good course correctment. And I also want to say, like, with, when you're trying to do like a course correction, that's like a really hard feat to pull off, especially because the reception of Dying Light 2 was so cold, and the need for all these fixes, and half the fan base had already left by then. Dying Light really felt like it was on life support, and the way they were able to just like fix everything and just make a total banger of a game, it's like, I don't want to understate how impressive that is. So I really wanted to highlight that. As for my negatives, I don't have a ton in terms of, this isn't about to become a huge long list. I really only had a couple moments that and a couple details that I kind of wanted to mention. Even though I said I really liked the environment, I did feel like the map was like a little too small, in that for two reasons. One, I felt like I could always get from one side to the other, so I never felt in terms of if night was coming and I had 2 hours left on the clock, I always felt like I could get to a safe house, and there wasn't that moment of like, oh no, I'm stranded here, this is going to become, this big terrifying moment. And I also just felt like it was so easy to traverse it that I never felt like I needed cars. There's cars in the game. They're not nearly as good as the vehicles you could use in Dying Light 1 the following. So I guess I should also just put that down. The cars, they sort of like feel clunky and just like never are necessary. I always felt like I'd rather just run, walk, parkour, etc. But also with the map being too small, the other point I wanted to bring up is I started to feel pretty early on like I had seen everything. So, Dying Light 1 and Dying Light 2 have big map changes. Dying Light 1, it's basically towards the latter half of the game, 3/4 through the game, you go to a whole nother side of the city, and so you get a whole new area to explore and do parkour in. And Dying Light 1 has the first area where you're doing the whole prologue, like I said, where basically the entire cast sucks, and then you enter this much larger city which is all has skyscrapers, and you get this whole new like parachute system, etc. And when I first played Dying Light the Beast, I didn't know that it was basically a DLC that was getting released as its own game, because it had gotten big enough to warrant being its own game. So I was sort of thinking like, ooh, this pine tree area is really cool, but I wonder what the next area is going to be like. I wonder if we're going to get to a weird gothic city, German city or something like that. I didn't know where it was going to go. And so it ended up, there wasn't any other real second half of the map, and most of the map is the exact same biome. There's a few areas that felt kind of cool where you enter like a tall kind of farm field area, and there's sort of like a flowery area. But for the most part, it just kind of feels sort of samey, so I got a little bored with the map, so I felt like that was worth mentioning. I felt really frustrated with the character of the sheriff, and the thing is I actually really liked the sheriff, and I thought they were really interesting, and there's this moment where you're about to go fix a water supply, and she's the one who's saying, I don't think it's worth risking Crane to do it, and the other leader is the one spurring you on. So I was totally prepared for there to be, the reveal that the actual leader of the survivor faction is going to be the one to betray you, but it ends up being the opposite. And so I was sort of upset that, they like basically left the game for a really long time, because I thought they were a really cool character and I wanted to see more of them, and they don't really show up again until the very end. And then the way they handle the sheriff's sort of frustrating. So first, like I said, since I wanted to see more of the character, I felt like the catalyst for them being separated from me felt so unnecessary, because that scene with Crane where he confronts the Baron for the first time and is unprepared to really fight the Baron, that felt like it could have just been that the Baron just outsmarts Crane. He doesn't really need to be betrayed in that moment, so it wasn't like, oh, well, someone needs to betray him or else it won't make sense. And then afterwards, there's this annoying moment where Crane tells the sheriff, he's like, hey, I'm alive and I'm coming for you. And then he gets annoyed when she runs away, and he's like, how did she know I was coming for her? And it's like, you told her. And then when she finally comes back, I felt like she didn't do enough to earn the audience's and Crane's forgiveness. So basically what I mean by that is, when she finally re-arrives, the main settlement is getting attacked by the Baron's men, and she sort of just shows up and then gives Crane some orders and kind of a bit of intel and says, oh, there's some enemies on this roof, but we don't actually see her doing anything helpful. And in the big climactic fight of that scene where you're fighting two of these super large mutant zombies, chimeras, it's actually Lydia who comes in and helps you using her telepathic powers. And so by the end of the fight, you feel all of this gratitude for Lydia and still none for the sheriff. And it's like, had the sheriff been doing a ton of stuff where Crane keeps almost getting, grabbed or stabbed or whatever, and then she snipes that enemy, or she suddenly rolls onto the rooftop and helps you fight the enemies, something like that would have then made it been like, okay, bygones be bygones, you've made yourself useful and helpful. I would say that it could have come at a different point in the story, since we know that she's camping in the woods. There could have been a random scripted event where you get surrounded by the Baron's men, and then suddenly they start falling one by one, and it's revealed that the sheriff has come to help you, and then it's sort of like, hey, are we even now? That kind of thing. Because then I would have been so much more like, okay, that was cool, that was badass, I'm excited to be with the sheriff again. But instead, she sort of just shows up, kind of gives a couple orders, and then really never does anything the rest of the game to make it feel like I'm so glad I reconciled with her. Because the next big moment she has to shine is when you're attacking the Baron's courtyard, which is sort of one of the other moments I wanted to mention. So basically, you go into the castle, you clear out the courtyard, you lower the gate, and all of your allies come in. And then there's like a really clunky cutscene where they're like, okay, don't worry, we're going to take care of the courtyard. You go get the Baron. And then you just watch for like too long as there's like this really pathetic firefight of like 5 people versus an army, and they all get wiped out. And then you have to go fight for the courtyard yourself. And it's like, the whole plot of this entire game was that you need to make allies so you can fight the Baron, and then the moment that the allies are supposed to shine, they just get like wiped out immediately, to the point that it almost felt like it was supposed to be vaguely comedic, but then they play it as sad. And for example, there's this character named Sven, I believe, and he the camera lingers on him so long while he's trying to drag someone away that he's gonna get shot, and then surprise, surprise, he gets shot, and then you watch someone, sort of cry over him and then close his eyes, and then they're like, well, that was our whole army. And it just felt like a really just awkward moment, because it's supposed to be this time to do this siege and this invasion, and in any other game this is sort of the moment where all the heroes and characters you meet along the way band together for the climactic fight, and it was just super lame. So I felt like, and so again, the sheriff there doesn't do anything to feel remarkable or like, wow, I'm glad she's on my side. So my other complaint has to do also with, or I guess I have 2 more complaints and then I will be done with my complaints. I felt like Aiden, so one of the big reveals of the game is that the beast is Aiden from Dying Light 2, and he looks way cooler now than he did in the previous game. Like, he had a total glow up, which I feel like deserves getting written in green. We get a glow up for Aiden. And also, while I'm over here, I wanted to mention that the sort of vampire looking survivors, which are actually zombie survivors, they were all really cool, really compelling. I really like their character design since they kind of looked like they were vampires, although it is a little lame realizing that they're just zombie hybrids. But anyway, back to Aiden. We finally get Aiden back. We finally get the reveal, and it's okay, this guy was kind of lame in Dying Light 2. I'm ready for him now that he has all these extra powers, etc., to be so cool. And then he immediately does the lamest, most Aiden thing ever, where he sneaks out at night and he immediately gets captured by the Baron, which completely removes your team's negotiating power. And also, we had just done so much to try to capture Aiden, and also since he has like basically superpowers, it would have been nice to have him fighting on our side. But instead, he just immediately gets taken out of the plot. And it's just like, come on, Aiden. Like, why do you always have to be the lamest and like the dumbest character alive? Because the thing is later there's a moment where Crane and Aiden get to work together, and it's really cool, and it made me really excited for where the franchise was going to go. But I don't know why they did Aiden so dirty and had him still do just the lamest thing ever. I'll never understand that. Super weird choice. And then the final complaint I sort of have is, okay, the ending is cool. The plot is cool. And the big plot reveal is that most of the game was basically just an extended experiment by the Baron. That being said, I also felt like it was extremely predictable. Basically, anytime Crane gets any intel that feels like it should be kept a secret, he immediately radios into Olivia, and her reaction is always her being like, tell me more about that. And it's like, she's clearly feeding info. And also, when Crane first escapes, he gets assistance from Olivia, and Olivia talks to someone off camera, and she's like, this is risky, but okay, I guess I'll do it. And so the big twist was like super predictable. The entire game I was expecting it, and I was totally prepared for it, which was sort of a letdown. But it's also such an interestingly cool plot for an action horror zombie game that, like, I'm not faulting it too much, because it felt like a really original idea, and it's just a cool concept to think about, and I'm glad they went in that direction. But it is worth mentioning that it is unfortunately super predictable. And then once again with Olivia, I feel like Olivia, as with the sheriff, I feel like Crane is a little too forgiving, I should say. But at least Olivia did enough to make it feel warranted. While again with the sheriff, I was just sort of like, why did we need her? But she had seemed so cool beforehand. So let's see if I have any other closing thoughts in my notes here, or otherwise we will wrap this up. All right, so I don't have too much else in my notes here, so I just wanted to take a moment to sort of wrap this all up and just kind of repeat some of my thoughts, and just to say, I really, really liked this game. I feel like for the Dying Light franchise, it's like a 10 out of 10. I'm super excited to see what the next game will be. I'm a little cautious because I'm a little nervous with fights like the Baron's final fight and sort of the science that the Baron was doing. The implications of that have me a little concerned, but I love the new cast. I love the whole ensemble. Ultimately, it was really cool seeing Crane and Aiden work together, even though Aiden was a little lame, despite looking really cool. They did my boy Spike real dirty in the ending, but I also liked that the game wasn't afraid of pulling punches with having main character deaths, etc. There was a couple awkward moments, and the map at times was a little boring, only in that it was sort of samey. After 10 hours, 15 hours, I felt like I'd seen almost everything. And with the sheriff, I had been expecting sort of a choice where the sheriff shows up and you can either decide to forgive her and work with her, or attack her and not forgive her and get revenge, etc. Since it is a plot all about revenge, it felt a little weird that Crane was able to be so forgiving at times, and especially because some of the side quests actually have choices in them where you can make big decisions as to whether you're going to be forgiving of a character or not. So it's kind of weird that the main plot didn't have that, because ultimately, if you chose to not to not forgive the sheriff, you basically would just have one less fighter in that courtyard scene and one less fighter basically at the dinner table scene. But since she didn't really do anything at the dinner table, it feels like it could have had an empty chair, and it would have been kind of interesting to be like, oh, that's probably where the sheriff would have been, etc. I also wanted to praise the side quests. There's some really, really good ones. Some are a bit predictable as usual, but there was some really, really good ones. There was one about staying human, which had Liam and I'm forgetting the other character's name, but they're Irish. At least I'm pretty sure they're Irish, maybe Scottish. And they had an extremely intriguing, very heartfelt plot line that I thought was beautiful and really well done. And as I was trying to say earlier, with Dying Light 1 and 2 tends to do the whole annoying equals funny, I felt like they really toned that down in this game and instead had really earnest, likable characters, which made the whole plot so much more compelling. So I wanted to praise them for their side quests, and also just their NPC characters were, not just annoying and goofy and meant to be comic relief. There was way less comic relief, and instead there were just sort of like beautiful, sentimental moments. So wanted to praise that a lot. And yeah, just super impressed by this sort of course correction, and even if you've seen this, if you watched this and had the game spoiled for you, I'd still recommend you check it out. It is really fun to play through. There's tons of great scary moments, intriguing plot twists that I didn't cover, and just it's a lot of fun. I miss my time with it already, and I'm seriously counting down the days to the next one. So that sort of concludes this sort of little game review. I get that this is sort of different from the usual content I do on this channel, but at the same time, I feel like this channel is sort of accidentally moving in towards the direction of sort of like a media review channel. I'm having a lot of fun making these videos. I just sort of wanted to cover this since I happened to play it, and it's now October, so I thought it'd be kind of a fun horror-themed video to make. But if you guys want to see more stuff like this, want to see more game reviews, I'd love to make more. I'm having a lot of fun with it. But yeah, let me know. And if you haven't done so yet, if you could subscribe, like this video, that means a lot. It helps the video get out there more, helps the channel grow, and it's just fun to get sort of that positive feedback and sort of see this channel grow and this community grow. That being said, I really do read, and I respond to all of the comments. So if you have any thoughts on the beast that you want to share, I would love to see it in the comments below. What did you think about the plot twist? Did you think they were predictable? What did you think of Crane forgiving everybody in a game that's about revenge? What did you think of the ending, the whole helicopter conversation? I'd love to see it in the comments. I will respond and interact with them. So with that, I think I'm going to wrap this up. So I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.